The sky over Cedar Hollow Estates was the color of a dying ember orange, bleeding into black smoke, curling up like it had somewhere better to be. Sirens wailed 2 streets over. Up close you could smell it, scorched cedar siding, hot tar, and diesel exhaust from the pumper truck idling in my driveway. Correction, what used to be my driveway. Flames punched through the second-story window with a sound like a shotgun blast. A firefighter screamed,
"Get back! Roof's going!"
a heartbeat before a chunk of it caved in behind him. Marlene Vogt stood on the sidewalk in her bathrobe, arms crossed, watching my house die like she was scoring a listing.
"You had a crew light a fire 40 feet from my kid's window, Marlene."
"You gutless, power-drunk fraud." She didn't blink. Save the theatrics. Nobody's scared of you. She had no idea 18 months from that night she'd be standing in front of a bench with my name on it. I'm Wyatt Calloway. What would you have said to her face? Tell me below. And where are you watching from tonight? 3 years ago, none of this seemed possible. Cedar Hollow Estates was just home. A quiet cul-de-sac with good schools, decent neighbors, and a house my father built with his own hands back in 1978. One he poured the porch slab for himself on a Saturday in July, sweat dripping into wet concrete that still got his boot print pressed into the corner, if you know where to look. My father was a mason by trade. The kind of man who measured twice, cut once, and thought a level was the most honest tool ever invented. He used to tell me a house is just a pile of arguments that agreed to hold still. Every joint, every seam, some disagreement between weight and gravity that a good builder talks into a truce. I didn't understand what he meant until I was grown and building my own life out of the same stubborn materials. He died when Cole was still in diapers, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel him in that house every single day. His boot print in the porch, his initials scratched into a floor joist in the basement. The man was in the bones of the place. My wife Denise is a school nurse. The kind of person who remembers every kid's allergy and half their birthdays. Our son Cole was 14 and deep into his 4-H phase, which meant our backyard had somehow acquired 6 chickens, a rooster with delusions of grandeur, and a coop Cole built himself out of scrap lumber and pure stubbornness. It smelled like home, if that makes sense. Sawdust drifting from my workshop most evenings, cut grass in summer thick enough you could taste it in the back of your throat. The porch swing chain creaking every time the wind picked up, a sound I'd heard my whole childhood and never once got tired of. Some nights, I'd sit out there with a coffee that had gone lukewarm an hour earlier, listening to the neighborhood settle into itself, and think I'd done something right just by staying put. Then Marlene Vogt moved onto the board. You know the type. Real estate broker by trade, self-appointed sheriff of curb appeal by personality. She drove a white Lexus she washed twice a week, and she had a habit of pausing on the sidewalk in front of your house, just long enough to make you wonder what she'd found wrong with it. She showed up to our 4th of July cookout with a clipboard and a laser measuring tape, smiling the whole time, like she was doing us a favor. "Just getting some measurements for the newsletter," she said, aiming the laser at Cole's chicken coop, like it was a crime scene. It wasn't for the newsletter. 2 weeks later, we got a violation notice. Livestock and non-conforming outbuildings prohibited per Section 4.2 of the Cedar Hollow CC&Rs. Funny thing, the Hendersons 2 doors down had bees. The Okafors kept rabbits. The Delgados had a whole koi pond that smelled like a swamp in August. Nobody measured their backyards with a laser. "Maybe it's random," Denise said, not really believing it. "Nothing about Marlene is random," I told her. See, Marlene had this way of smiling at you while making it very clear you didn't quite belong. Not loud about it. Not the kind of thing you could point to in a meeting. Just little comments. About the kind of neighborhood we're building here. About certain families who didn't seem to understand the aesthetic. I'd done 2 tours as a combat engineer and spent 15 years running my own home inspection business. Steady work, calloused hands, a pickup truck with my logo on the door. Parked in the driveway most nights. Apparently that didn't fit Marlene's vision board. My truck was commercial in character. My dad's flag was oversized. My existence, near as I could tell, was a rounding error she intended to correct. I'm not a guy who picks fights. 20 years in construction, and the Army teaches you that the loud reaction is usually the wrong one. So when that first fine showed up, $50 laughably small, I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't post an angry rant online. I did the boring thing. I decided to fight it with paperwork. I had no idea that decision was about to become the opening move in a fight that would burn my house down and end with me sitting on a bench with a gavel in my hand. But that's getting ahead of myself. The Cedar Hollow CC&R's covenants, conditions, and restrictions for anyone lucky enough to never deal with an HOA were supposedly public record for homeowners. Supposedly. I submitted a simple written request. Send me the full rulebook plus the minutes from whatever meeting had approved that livestock clause. Nothing crazy, just wanted to see if the rule actually existed the way Marlene claimed it did. Her response came back within the hour, which should have told me something right there. Nobody replies that fast unless they're either very organized or very nervous. That information is subject to board discretion, she wrote. Board discretion. Cute phrase for no. Funny enough, I remembered something from years back. A buddy of mine went through an HOA nightmare of his own, and he'd told me half joking, half dead serious over beers one night, "Wyatt, if they ever stonewall you on the books, just remember most states actually make 'em show you the money. It's not a courtesy, it's the law. They just bank on you not knowing that." At the time, I'd laughed it off as bar talk. Sitting at my kitchen table with a legal pad and way too much coffee, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like a loaded gun somebody'd handed me years before I needed it. So I did it the way that old memory told me to, and the county clerk confirmed it when I called, sounding a little amused that I'd even asked. Second request, certified mail this time, return receipt required, a signature and a date stamp Marlene couldn't pretend never happened. The smell of that envelope is burned into my memory for a stupid reason. Cheap toner and a paper edge sharp enough to slice my thumb open when I tore it apart to check the tracking number. Small price for a paper trail, and worth remembering if an HOA won't open its books for you, that silence usually means something's hiding in there. Marlene didn't take the hint. She took it personal. Within a week, 2 HOA inspectors in golf shirts, Cedar Hollow logo stitched on both, looking deeply unenthusiastic about their jobs, showed up to assess compliance. My lawn edging was suddenly inconsistent. My mailbox post was the wrong shade of white, and my flagpole, the one I'd had since my last deployment, was now a non-conforming vertical structure. "You've got to be kidding me," I said to the guy holding the clipboard. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Just doing what we're told, man." Then quieter, almost under his breath as he turned to go. "For what it's worth, you're the 4th house this month. She's got a list." That stopped me. A list. I filed that away too. Not on paper, just in the back of my head, where the useful things go. Cole thought the whole thing was hilarious in the way only a 14-year-old can. He named one of the hens Marlene, strutting around the coop like she owned the place, pecking at anything smaller than her. Denise nearly choked on her coffee the first time he said it out loud at dinner. "That's not very respectful," I told him, failing to hide my own grin. "Neither is a $50 fine for a chicken coop, Dad." Fair point. That night I did something small that turned out to matter. I walked the cul-de-sac at dusk, coffee in hand, and I counted. Bees, rabbits, a koi pond, a trampoline the size of a small aircraft carrier. 3 RVs parked in 3 driveways, none of them cited. If Marlene had a list, the list had a pattern, and the pattern wasn't about rules. It was about who she'd decided the neighborhood belonged to. The gravel crunched under my boots the whole way home, and I remember thinking, she's not enforcing a rule book. She's running a sorting operation. By month's end, the fines had compounded. 50 became 100, and a letter arrived mentioning a potential lien on the property if balances went unpaid. Legal language built to scare, and I'll admit it worked a little. I wasn't scared of Marlene. I was scared of what a woman with a clipboard and unchecked power could actually do to a family that just wanted to keep some chickens and fly a flag. I filed that letter in the same folder as everything else. The folder was getting thick enough that Denise joked I should charge it rent. Thick enough that I'd started keeping a second copy at my brother's place just in case. I didn't know it yet, But that folder wasn't just paperwork. It was the first brick in a wall Marlene had no idea she was about to run straight into. My first HOA board meeting felt exactly like I'd imagined jury duty would feel if jury duty were run by someone who genuinely enjoyed the power. The community center smelled like stale coffee and dry erase marker fluorescent lights, buzzing just loud enough to notice folding chairs arranged in rows like a funeral nobody wanted to attend. Marlene ran that room like she owned the deed to it personally. She talked over people. She tabled agenda items that weren't convenient. When my turn finally came up 40 minutes late after she'd let 3 unrelated landscaping complaints eat the clock, she cut me off twice before I'd finished a sentence. "We're aware of your concerns, Mr. Calloway," she said, already reaching for the next folder. "Moving on." I sat back down, jaw tight, feeling like I'd just watched someone slam a door in slow motion. That's when the guy next to me leaned over. Older fella, silver hair, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. Turned out his name was Harold, retired paralegal, lived 2 streets over. He'd clearly sat through more of these meetings than he cared to count. "You know she can't legally do that, right?" he murmured, barely above a whisper. "Most states have rules about letting homeowners actually speak on agenda items. She's just betting nobody in this room has ever bothered to look it up." I hadn't. Not until that night, sitting in my truck in the parking lot, scrolling through my phone by the dome light, while Denise waited up at home. Turned out, Harold was dead right. Plenty of states have open meeting or member participation requirements that flat out say a board can't just silence a homeowner because it's inconvenient. An HOA meeting isn't the board's living room. You're not a guest there. You're an owner, and in most places that comes with an actual right to be heard. Harold and I got coffee that week, and I learned the man was a quiet goldmine. 30 years as a paralegal, half of them in real estate litigation, and a wife he'd lost 2 winters back, who'd apparently been the only person in Cedar Hollow who could make Marlene back down. "Nadine used to stare her right down at these meetings," he told me, stirring his coffee slow. "Marlene's a bully, Wyatt, and bullies do great right up until somebody keeps notes." He tapped the table when he said it, like he was setting something down between us. I think that was the moment I stopped being a guy with a grievance and started being a guy with a project. I started recording every meeting after that legally, since our state only needed one party's consent, meaning mine was enough. I logged every interaction after that too. Dates, times, witnesses, word for word when I could manage it. Not because I was building towards some grand plan yet, just because Harold's little warning had planted something in my head. If Marlene was going to play this game, I wasn't going to be the only one without a paper trail. Marlene noticed the recorder on the table pretty fast. Didn't say anything about it directly. Instead, she started working the room in that quiet, poisonous way she had, dropping little comments to other homeowners between meetings. Difficult, combative. Once I overheard her tell a newer family near the punch bowl that some people just don't seem to understand the kind of neighborhood we're building here. Not looking at me, but not exactly hiding who she meant either. The chairs scraped against the tile floor every time someone shifted in their seat, a sound I swear I can still hear if I think about it too hard. Small, dumb detail, sticks with you anyway. So does the way the old projector hummed in the corner, throwing a slightly crooked rectangle of light onto a screen nobody bothered to straighten. There was one neighbor at those meetings I want you to remember, because she matters later. A woman named Eunice, from the corner lot mid-70s, sharp as a tack and twice as tired. She'd gotten a fine 2 years back over a garden gnome of all things, paid it without a word. But I caught her watching me record that meeting with something like hunger on her face. The look of somebody who'd wanted to fight and never found the door. After, in the parking lot, she just said, "Good for you," and got in her car. 4 words. I didn't understand yet how many people in that subdivision had been quietly worn down the exact same way. Then, 2 weeks later, Marlene pushed something through at a meeting I couldn't attend. Denise had a work thing I was covering for Cole's 4-H event, a controlled burn ordinance targeting overgrown lots, specifically the wooded half-acre directly behind our property line. Technically HOA owned. Technically never maintained a single day since I'd lived there. I read the minutes the next morning, over coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier. and something in my gut just didn't sit right. Couldn't tell you why yet, just a feeling the kind you get in the army right before something goes sideways. Turns out that feeling was worth listening to. The contractor Marlene hired for the controlled burn showed up in a truck that looked older than Cole no permit sticker on the windshield, no county fire marshal signage anywhere in sight, details I wouldn't clock until much later when it actually mattered. At the time, all I knew was that the wind that afternoon was wrong. Gusting, unpredictable. The kind of dry, gusty day my old fire department training screamed at me not to burn anything in. I was 2 streets over off duty, helping a neighbor haul lumber when I caught the smell, not campfire, not yard waste smoke, but something sharper. Accelerant. My stomach dropped before my brain even finished the thought. By the time I got back to my own street, embers were riding the wind like fireflies gone wrong, drifting clean over the property line into our yard. Flames punched through the second-story window with a sound like a shotgun blast. Firefighters scrambled off the truck the second it arrived, boots pounding gravel, one of them screaming, "Get back! Roof's going!" A heartbeat before a chunk of it caved in behind him in a shower of sparks. The heat hit my face, like somebody'd opened an oven door 2 feet from my skin. Smoke rolled thick and black, stinging my eyes, and underneath it the stink of melting vinyl siding, mixed with diesel exhaust from the pumper truck idling, where my driveway used to feel safe. Cole's coupe survived sitting there, almost mockingly untouched at the edge of the yard. The house didn't. Denise's nursing certificates, Cole's baby photos, the printed ones, the box Denise kept meaning to scan and never did. My father's tools, the ones I'd kept oiled and organized in that workshop for 15 years. His level, the good one, the one he swore was more honest than most men. Gone. All of it, in the time it took the fire crew to even get water flowing. I need you to understand what that basement joist meant. My father's initials were scratched into it. 16 years old when he helped his own father frame a barn, he'd told me once, and he never framed anything after without signing it somewhere nobody'd look. That joist went up in the fire like everything else. The last thing my father ever touched in that house gone in a burn Marlene vote called brush maintenance. I didn't cry that night. I want to be honest, I've thought a lot about why I didn't. I think some griefs are too big to leak out slow. They just sit in you like a foundation and wait. Marlene Vogt stood on the sidewalk in her bathrobe, arms crossed, watching my house collapse like she was scoring a listing that had gone slightly over budget. "This is what happens when people don't maintain their property, Wyatt," she said, not even bothering to raise her voice over the sirens. I turned on her ash, stinging my throat voice, cracking from something that wasn't smoke. "You had a crew light a fire 40 feet from my kid's bedroom window, Marlene. You gutless, power-drunk fraud." She didn't blink. "It was HOA-authorized brush clearing. You're not a board president. You're a 2-bit tyrant with a clipboard and a Lexus." A firefighter grabbed my arm, hauling me back a step, as another wall groaned and folded into the fire behind me. Marlene just watched, arms still crossed, unmoved, like the whole scene was beneath her. "Save the theatrics," she said. "Nobody's scared of you." I didn't answer that one out loud. Didn't have it in me right then. But something in me filed it away, the exact way she said it, the exact look on her face, the same cold way you remember an insult from a drill sergeant 20 years later. Word for word, waiting for the day it stops being true. What I did instead, once the adrenaline burned off enough for my hands to stop shaking, was start noticing things. 15 years of home inspections trains your eye, whether you want it to or not, and something about the burn pattern across that lot didn't sit right with me. Fire doesn't spread the way this one had, not from a single accidental source. It looked lit from more than one point, spaced out, deliberate. A single dropped match doesn't leave 3 separate char origins in a rough line pointing at a house. I said nothing about it that night. Not to Marlene, not even to Denise, standing beside me in her scrubs, with soot on her face and both arms wrapped around Cole. Cole kept saying he was sorry, over and over, like a kid does when the world breaks and he can't find who to blame. And Denise just held him and said, "Not your fault, baby, not your fault," into his hair. I stood there and I took pictures. Angle after angle, the way I would have documented a scene overseas, quiet, methodical, no wasted motion. If I couldn't hold my family together with my hands right then, I could at least build them a case with my eyes. Marlene had no idea that the woman she just told, "Nobody's scared of you," was about to spend the next 18 months proving her wrong one photograph at a time. We spent the next few weeks crammed into my brother-in-law Ray's basement, Denise Cole, me, and a growing pile of donated clothes that never quite fit right. Ray's a good man who snores like a chainsaw through drywall, and the air down there smelled like old cardboard and the industrial dehumidifier running around the clock, a sound that became the background noise of grief for a while. Cole slept on a cot by the water heater and stopped talking much. Denise went back to work in 3 days because she said sitting still was worse. I understood that. I did the same thing, just with a banker's box instead of a nursing station. The second records request finally came through during that stretch, the certified one. The one that forced Marlene's hand. Because this time I'd cited the actual statute number instead of just asking nicely. Funny how fast board discretion evaporates once you can point to a specific law and a case number. What landed on the kitchen table wasn't a stack of paper. It was a banker's box, and buried somewhere in month 4 of the reserve fund ledger, between line items for landscaping and a suspiciously overpriced community newsletter printing charge, was a payment, then another, then a pattern, all going to a company called Vote Property Solutions LLC. I sat there staring at that name for a solid minute before it clicked. Vote. Marlene's maiden name apparently tucked into an LLC registered 18 months earlier, the same stretch of time she'd been on the board pushing lot maintenance line items through at rates that made my contractor buddy laugh out loud when I read them to him over the phone. $12,000 for seasonal brush abatement on lots that hadn't seen a weed whacker since the Clinton administration. She wasn't just enforcing petty rules. She'd built herself a quiet little pipeline, billing the HOA for maintenance work, including clearing that wooded lot that records showed had never actually been performed. Not once. Not by anyone. The dry rustle of those photocopied bank statements is a sound I can still hear if I sit with it too long. Papery and thin, completely unremarkable for something that reframed my entire year. This was never about curb appeal or chickens or a flagpole from my last deployment. It was cover. Here's what I finally pieced together, sitting in Ray's basement at 2 in the morning with a highlighter and a legal pad Marlene had been billing the HOA for years to maintain that wooded lot. Never touched it, pocketed the money. And then some new insurance audit or reserve review came sniffing, and suddenly she needed that lot to actually look maintained fast, before anyone walked it and noticed the maintained half-acre was a jungle. So she rammed through a burn ordinance and had it torched. My family's house wasn't collateral damage in some overzealous HOA crusade. It was collateral damage in somebody covering her tracks. I thought about something Harold had said to me weeks earlier, almost as a throwaway line. Something about how half the rules in these places start looking like alibis if you just follow where the money actually goes. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Sitting in that basement with a banker's box open in front of me, it landed different. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the loud, shaking way I'd been the night of the fire. This was colder, quieter. The kind of resolve you get when you realize the fight was never really about you at all, and that other families in Cedar Hollow had probably been quietly bled dry the same way, never even knowing to look. Eunice and her garden gnome, the 4th house this month kid with the clipboard. A whole neighborhood of people who'd paid up and shut up because fighting felt impossible. I closed the box, looked over at Denise, and said the only thing that felt true. She didn't just burn our house down. She's been robbing this whole neighborhood blind, and I think I finally know how to prove it. Building a case against someone like Marlene wasn't a one-man job, so I started making calls. First one was Harold, obviously, the retired paralegal from the meeting, the guy who'd planted half the ideas that got me this far without even meaning to. He didn't hesitate for a second when I laid out the ledger findings. "Bring the box over," he said. "Let's see how deep this actually goes." We spent 4 straight nights at his kitchen table, him with a magnifying glass and a pot of coffee that never emptied, cross-referencing every Vote Property Solutions invoice against the actual condition of the lots. By night 4, he sat back, took off his glasses, and said, "Wyatt, in 30 years I never saw one this clean. She wrote it all down. They always think they're too smart to get caught, so they never bother to hide it well. He looked almost happy. I think in a way he was doing this for Nadine. Second call was to my old volunteer fire department, specifically a guy named Desmond who'd done cause and origin training and had zero patience for sloppy paperwork. Desmond and I had pulled a family of 4 out of a kitchen fire together back in '09, and there's a bond that forms in a thing like that you don't have to explain. When I described the burn pattern I'd photographed that night, multiple ignition points, no permit visible, wind conditions that any trained crew should have flagged as a no-go, he went quiet for a second, then said, "Wyatt, you know you're entitled to that fire marshal's report, right? Cause and origin findings on a property loss like that. That's not sealed. That's yours to request." I hadn't known. I did after that phone call, filed the request the next morning, and a week later a report landed in my inbox confirming what my gut had already told me at the scene. The burn had never been permitted with the county at all. An unpermitted burn isn't bad luck. It's a paper trail with somebody's name already stapled to it. Third call, and this one I almost didn't make, was to a local reporter named Priya Chandrasekaran, who'd been quietly sniffing around HOA corruption stories in the county for a couple years without ever landing one that stuck. She met me at a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease, flipped through my folder for exactly 4 minutes and said, "This is the one." I believed her. She'd been burned before. She told me sources who went quiet, boards that lawyered up, stories that died in legal review. "I don't need it fast," she said. "I need it airtight." That made 2 of us. Then came the part I genuinely didn't see coming, the kind of detail that sounds made up until it happens to you. Digging around county records with Harold one night, half by accident, I found out our county elects a local magistrate position, a small claims judge, basically, who also happens to handle HOA arbitration disputes. Seat had been unopposed for years. Filing deadline for a special election was 3 weeks out. I sat with that for a long night on the porch, Ray's porch borrowed, listening to the same swing chain creak that used to hang outside a house that didn't exist anymore because Cole had rigged it up on a spare hook just so it'd sound the same. That kid. He didn't say a word about why he did it. He just wanted his dad to have one thing that sounded like home. I filed the paperwork the next morning. Told almost nobody. Not Priya, not even Denise at first. Not because I was being dramatic, but because a low turnout special election doesn't need a campaign. It needs nobody paying attention until it's already done. When I finally told Denise, she just looked at me a long moment and said, "You're not running to beat her. You're running so nobody has to lose a house to find out the truth." She was right. She usually is. Meanwhile, Desmond and I set up something a little more hands-on. Weatherproof trail cameras mounted along my own remaining property line, completely legal, completely on my land, aimed toward that still scarred wooded lot, betting that whoever Marlene had hired for cleanup would come back sooner or later to finish the job quietly. Sure enough, 3 weeks in headlights showed up on camera at 6 a.m. on a Sunday. Same beat-up truck as before, no permit sticker, doing exactly the kind of unauthorized work that lands people in real trouble. Cole predictably insisted on naming the cameras after old cartoon detectives. "Scooby Cam's got eyes on the lot again, Dad." Which is not a sentence I ever expected to say out loud with a straight face, but there we were. It was the most he'd talked in weeks. I let him name all 4. Denise took to calling the whole operation Wyatt's Little War Room, half teasing, half proud, every time she caught me hunched over Ray's kitchen table, with printouts spread out like a battle map. The special election came and went with almost no fanfare. Low turnout exactly like I'd guessed, a stack of ballots counted in a back room by 2 bored county clerks. I won by a margin nobody outside that room probably ever noticed. Marlene didn't hear about it for weeks. Wouldn't have meant anything to her yet, even if she had just some name on a ballot she'd never bothered to read. She had no idea the folder on my kitchen table had grown into something with a badge number attached to it now. Marlene's first real sign that something had shifted came from her insurer, not from me. Turns out fire marshal report requests get logged, and logged requests eventually get noticed by the people writing the checks. Her insurance company started asking pointed questions about the permit status of that burn, questions Marlene clearly hadn't prepped an answer for, because the next board meeting she ran felt tighter than usual, her smile a half-second too slow to land. She went on the offensive the only way she knew how. Words started drifting through the cul-de-sac that I was struggling since the fire, that the stress had made me unstable, a little too fixated on the HOA for a man who'd already lost everything. It's a nasty little trick, using someone's grief as the evidence against them. She even tried pushing a nuisance homeowner removal vote through the board, aiming to strip my remaining standing in the community entirely. The bakery platter she brought to soften up the other board members before that vote was almost comical in its transparency, that sickly sweet frosting smell filling the room while she passed out paper plates and reminded everyone gently, unofficially, off the record, that I'd been difficult from the very beginning. I watched two neighbors take a cookie each and avoid my eyes on the way back to their seats, which told me everything about how well it was working. But here's where it started to turn. And it turned because of a person, not a document. Eunice, Garden Gnome Eunice, corner lot 4 words in the parking lot Eunice, stood up in the middle of that meeting, 75 years old, hands shaking a little, and she said, "Marlene, I've sat quiet at these meetings for 6 years. I'd like to know why my gnome cost me $40 and the vote driveway seal coat cost this association $9,000. The room went dead still. Marlene laughed it off, moved on fast, but something cracked open in that room that couldn't be closed again. Afterward, Eunice found me in the lot and said, "I'm too old to be scared of that woman anymore. What do you need?" I nearly hugged her. I didn't say a word about the case publicly. Not one comment, not one confrontation. Harold and I had already agreed the compiled financial evidence, the ledger, the shell company, the fire marshal's findings, all of it went quietly to the state HOA regulatory office and the county prosecutor's fraud unit instead. No press release, no dramatic reveal, just a certified filing and a case number, the same slow, boring paperwork trick that had gotten me this far in the first place. Marlene didn't know that inquiry existed yet. She thought she was still playing chess against a guy in a basement with a shoebox full of receipts. Desperation does strange things to people used to controlling every room they walk into. A week later, Priya called me, practically laughing into the phone. She'd obtained through a records request loophole in the county's public filing system photographic proof that someone had gone back into the HOA's digital ledger and attempted to backdate the Vote Property Solutions payments, changing dates and line item descriptions to make them look older, more routine, less suspicious. Amateur move. The metadata doesn't lie even when the paperwork tries to. Every edit left a timestamp. She'd essentially signed and dated her own cover-up. I remember sitting with that photo on my phone, feeling something settle in my chest that wasn't quite satisfaction, yet more like watching a wall you've been quietly reinforcing for months finally hold weight under real pressure. Marlene, for her part, kept smiling at HOA functions, kept measuring lawns with her laser tape, kept acting like a woman with nothing to hide. She had absolutely no idea how much daylight was already pouring through the cracks. The flyer showed up in mailboxes on a Tuesday morning, cheap paper curling slightly at the edges from the overnight humidity. The flat slap of it hitting metal boxes up and down the street, audible enough that Denise heard it from the kitchen and went to check before I did. No name on it, obviously. Just enough insinuation to do the damage a house fire, a family conveniently struggling financially, a suggestion never quite stated outright, always just implied that maybe, just maybe, a man desperate enough might torch his own home for the insurance money. I'll admit for about 30 seconds it worked on me exactly the way it was designed to. Not because I doubted myself, but because I knew exactly how fast a rumor like that could spread through a cul-de-sac full of people already primed by months of Marlene's quiet little comments about certain families. That was the part that got under my skin. Not that she'd lie, but that she'd figured out which lie the neighborhood was already halfway ready to believe about a guy like me. Denise handled it better than I did. Way better. She didn't yell, didn't post anything online, didn't even raise her voice. She just made photocopies, actual photocopies, the old-fashioned way, of our real insurance claim file. The one showing we'd been underinsured on the rebuild and had lost money overall, and left a small stack of them on the community center's public bulletin board, with a sticky note that just read, "Public record, feel free to verify." Then she went to work and treated a kid's skinned knee, and never mentioned it again. My wife is tougher than I'll ever be, and I've diffused actual ordnance. That's the thing about a lie built on insinuation. It can't survive next to an actual document. Marlene's flyer didn't just fail. It backfired hard enough that two neighbors who'd never spoken to us before showed up on our porch that weekend with a casserole and an apology neither of us had asked for. And Eunice went door to door, I found this out later, with her own photocopy of that insurance file, telling anyone who'd listen exactly which board president had something to hide. A 75-year-old woman with a manila folder did more damage to Marlene in one weekend than I'd managed in a year. Never underestimate a neighbor who's finally had enough. Meanwhile, quieter than anything else in this whole mess, I got sworn into the magistrate's seat on a Tuesday morning, in an office that smelled like fresh paint and old carpet glue. No fanfare, no audience beyond a clerk and a Bible. I hadn't expected to actually need. I thought about my father when I put my hand on it. The honest level. Measure twice. First thing I did before I signed a single document was recuse myself in writing from any case naming Marlene Vote directly or Vote Property Solutions LLC by name. I wasn't about to hand her a single legitimate reason to challenge what was coming. Instead, I scheduled the county's regular quarterly HOA compliance hearing open to the public, like it always was, where the fraud findings would be formally presented by the county prosecutor's office, not by me, not personally, not with my name attached to a single accusation in that room. Word finally reached Marlene about a week later, secondhand, filtered through gossip the way most things in Cedar Hollow traveled. Some new guy was the county magistrate now, somebody mentioned at a barbecue. She didn't ask who, didn't connect a single dot. She had no idea the bench she'd be standing in front of soon enough already had my name carved into the plate. The community center was packed that Thursday night. Folding chairs dragged in from a storage closet that clearly hadn't been touched since the last quarterly hearing. Nobody bothered attending. This one was different. Word travels fast in a small county once a local reporter starts making calls, and Priya had made plenty. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the same tired hum I remembered from my very first meeting in that room. A news camera crew had set up in the back corner, tripod legs scraping against tile with a sharp metallic click that cut through the murmur of nervous homeowners finding seats. The county prosecutor sat at a folding table up front, a banker's box beside her, thick enough that it needed both hands to lift. Harold was in the second row, Desmond in the third. Eunice sat dead center in the front, hands folded on her purse, chin up, wearing what I can only describe as her funeral best. Marlene walked in like she owned the place, because for years, in every way that mattered, she basically had. Heels clicking, chin up, a folder tucked under one arm, like she was ready for another routine session of running the clock out on anyone who dared question her. She froze about 6 feet through the doorway, because the seat behind the front table wasn't empty this time, and the nameplate sitting on it, plain black letters on a walnut base, read, Magistrate W. Calloway. I watched her face do something I'd honestly waited a long time to see. Not shock exactly, more like the specific slow-motion horror of watching a door you thought was locked swing open on its own. And for just a second, in my head, I heard it again. Her voice, on the sidewalk, ash in the air. Nobody's scared of you. I let it play once, then I let it go. I didn't need it anymore. I didn't say a word to her directly. Didn't need to. I opened the hearing with the same flat procedural tone I'd use for any case, formally noted my recusal from anything naming her or her LLC, and handed the floor straight to the county prosecutor. No speech, no victory lap, just paperwork same as it had always been between us. Except this time, the paperwork had teeth. The prosecutor laid it out piece by piece, calm and methodical, each one landing like a gavel strike nobody in that room was expecting. The Vote Property Solutions payments cross-referenced against maintenance work that had never been performed. The $12,000 for brush abatement on a lot that was still a jungle the day it burned. The fire marshal's cause and origin report confirming the burn behind my old property line had never been permitted with the county and noting multiple points of origin. The backdated ledger entries, time-stamped metadata displayed clean and undeniable on a projector screen that hadn't worked properly in years, until somebody finally bothered to fix the bulb that morning. Somewhere behind me, a chair creaked as someone shifted their weight. The sound absurdly loud in a room that had otherwise gone dead silent. The prosecutor finished, looked up and asked Marlene directly, official, on the record, whether she wished to respond to any of the findings presented. Marlene opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. 18 months earlier, standing in the ash outside a house that used to be mine, she'd told me nobody was scared of me. Standing in that room now, watching her search for words that simply weren't there, I didn't feel the need to remind her of a single syllable of it. Her silence was doing all the talking I ever needed it to. The board removal vote passed unanimously less than 10 minutes later. The case was formally referred for criminal fraud charges. Someone near the back murmured that her real estate license would likely be flagged for review by the state board within the week, and from the look on her face, she already knew it too. Eunice from the front row said just loud enough to carry, "That's for the gnome." Half the room laughed. Marlene didn't. I banged the gavel once, closed the hearing, and didn't look at her again on my way out. The months after that hearing moved slower than the year before them. In the good way, the kind of slow you actually get to enjoy instead of just survive. The HOA board got rebuilt from the ground up. New bylaws, a rotating homeowner audit committee, and an actual requirement that financial records get published every quarter instead of buried behind a phrase like board discretion. Harold volunteered for the first audit seat, which felt about right given everything he'd started without even meaning to. Eunice took a seat too, still muttering about that garden gnome every chance she got, and God help the next board president who tries to laser measure a chicken coop on her watch. We rebuilt on the same lot. Same address, same view of the cul-de-sac, new foundation, except this time, I poured the new porch slab myself on a Saturday in July, same as my father had back in '78. Cole helped me press a boot print into the wet concrete before it set, right in the corner, same spot as the old one. And down in the new basement before the drywall went up, I climbed a ladder and scratched my father's initials into a fresh joist, and then my own underneath. And then, because he insisted, Cole's under mine. 3 generations in a house that a woman with a clipboard thought she could erase. Some things you just rebuild, honest. The recovered funds from the Vote Property Solutions mess, combined with a community fundraiser that raised more than anyone expected, seeded a scholarship for the kids of local volunteer firefighters. We named it after my father. Desmond cried a little at the announcement dinner and pretended it was allergies. Nobody believed him, and nobody called him on it either. First scholarship went to a girl whose dad pulled 2 kids out of a garage fire last spring. She's studying structural engineering. My father would have liked that a lot. Fresh-cut lumber still has a smell I don't think I'll ever get tired of. Sharp, clean, a little like starting over. The porch swing chain creaks the exact same way it always did, which Cole insists is impossible to fake, and Denise insists is just physics. And honestly, I don't care which one of them is right. The hen named Marlene is still laying eggs, strutting around like she owns the coop. We never did rename her. Felt wrong to erase a good running joke over something that ridiculous. I didn't take that magistrate seat to get revenge on anyone. I want to be honest about that because it would have been easy to let it turn into that. I took it because a family shouldn't need a house fire and 18 months of paperwork just to get somebody to tell them the truth. If Cedar Hollow taught me anything, it's that most of these fights aren't won with anger. They're won with a folder that keeps getting thicker while everyone underestimates the guy filling it. My father used to say, a level's the most honest tool ever invented. Turns out a certified mail receipt is a close second. So if your HOA's ever made you feel small over a chicken coop, a flagpole, or a fence 2 inches too tall, you're not crazy, and you're not alone. Start asking for the records. Start writing things down. You'd be surprised how much power is sitting in a manila folder, and the patience to fill it. If this story hit close to home, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one, and honestly, some of your HOA stories make mine look tame. And if you want to catch the next one, hit subscribe, because next week I'm telling you about the neighbor who tried to steal my well water rights, and the loophole that ended up making her pay everyone's water bill for an entire year. Here's the part nobody tells you about winning one of these. You get the house back. You don't get the joist back. Wyatt Calloway rebuilt on the same lot, poured the same porch slab his father poured in '78, but the beam his old man scratched his initials into when he was 16 years old, that one's ash. You can win the whole fight and still lose the one thing that never had a dollar value on it. That's the quiet math of these stories that the highlight reel skips. And I'll be straight with you. The guy didn't win because he was angry. Plenty of angry men lose to their HOA every single day. He won because he got tired in the right direction. He turned grief into a folder. 18 months of certified mail. A $12,000 line item for brush clearing on a lot that never saw a rake. A fire marshal's report that said what his gut already knew. He didn't outshout Marlene Vogt, he out-documented her. And when the room finally went silent, it wasn't because he raised his voice. It was because he never had to. That's the thing about the Marlenes of the world. They count on you being too busy, too worn down, too polite to ask for the books. They're right about that far more often than they're wrong. So let me ask you something, and I actually want the answer down in the comments. Not, have you ever had an HOA problem everybody has? I mean, they're a folder you should be keeping right now and you're just not. A fine you paid without asking why. A rule that only ever seems to apply to your house. Tell me. I read them. If this one stuck with you, do the 3 things like it. Share it with the one neighbor who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because there's always another Marlene, and there's always another folder. You don't beat petty power by getting loud. You beat it by outlasting the person who assumed you'd quit first.